What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my F122 My Team career mode. We are coming off another extremely disappointing outing in the Canadian Grand Prix, and we are heading forward now towards Silverstone and the British Grand Prix. Now, a couple things to address at the start of this episode is that this is going to be our first time playing on the 1.06 patch, and so we're going to be seeing some new things, as well as that we are adjusting, and I'm showing this in the video. We are going to be adjusting the AI difficulty because clearly I have a long way to go before I can play on the hard difficulty on this My Team career mode. And also I'm showing here that we are going to be playing on the medium traction control rather than the full traction control, which I have been. As we set our activity timeline here for the week before Silverstone, I decided to lower the AI difficulty just because the last few races have really shown that I don't have the skill to even try and keep up with the hard difficulty AI. And so we're going to lower that down. It's going to take a couple of episodes, but we're really going to try and dial in the AI difficulty to really give the good balance of challenge, but also entertainment, because I don't think it's as entertaining watching me come in last every single race. And so as we are looking at our R&D setup for this race weekend, we are doing our best to continue to try and push forward and take advantage of those almost 2,500 research points that we currently have, trying to continue to develop our car as the best we can. We are going to be making sure that we have as much going as we can, taking advantage of any potential discounts we may have from past R&D that we may have done, as well as practice sessions. And it looks like we are pretty much going to be full up as we continue to look through our durability upgrades, trying to take as much advantage, like I said, of this 2,300 R&D points that we have. And it's going to be a lot of minor things, but at the same time, we're just always trying to make sure we have something going, trying to make sure that we get the most out of our R&D point stash that we've currently been saving up. So right now, it looks like we have pretty much everything going as much as we can, and we will, make sure that we are looking as good as we possibly can as we make sure that every department is completely full up. And I think we are doing our last little checks here, and our R&D is completely full up until something either finishes or fails. We will hope nothing does, but nonetheless, here we are. Here's a list of all of our upgrades that we currently have going on. Obviously a lot of minor upgrades, but hopefully it'll be, quantity over quality in this instance, trying to get to those big upgrades that are coming. And as we head over towards our facilities, you'll notice that we have about $3.25 million just kind of hanging out in our bank. And so we want to be getting some new facility upgrades. And now that the personnel upgrades are working after this 1.06 patch, we are going to be purchasing the pit equipment upgrade for our personnel, trying to limit the mistakes made during pit stops, because as of right now, pit stops are one of the few things we can afford to take many mistakes on, just because they can really truly slow you down over the course of a race. And when you are struggling as much as we are, then less mistakes you can make, the better. And since we still do have over $2 million left, we are going to go ahead and get some extra R&D generation from our chassis department, just because we're trying to make sure we have as much money as possible. Even though we are currently running a low balance, we aren't worried about it too much. And we actually get an opportunity to get a new rival in this episode. We are going to go ahead and pick Daniel Ricciardo here of McLaren, just because it seems like we are battling him more often than Lando Norris, who seems well and above where we currently are. So yeah, it's going to be a hard one, but we're going to choose Daniel here, and hopefully we can make some stuff happen as we move forward through the week. We're seeing some things come through, dealing with our running costs, doing some training. Unfortunately, one of our R&D items failed, and so we're going to go ahead and make sure we get that restarted as soon as we can. Just making sure that that gets done when it needs to. So unfortunately, a little bit of a delay here on our engine powertrain section, but at this point, we're taking what we can. As we look at the R&D chart, you can see that we badly need some upgrades to come through, as we are only barely above the Williams team in this R&D chart, and we need to start making some stuff happen and really trying to get some results to really show that what we're doing is all for the better. So hopefully we'll start to see some improvements on this chart as some of our major list of upgrades come through, and we can try and start getting to some of these major upgrades that are going to be coming soon, I promise. So let's head over to our Pirelli hot lap and let's talk about what we have coming this week as we head to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. This is a track I've actually been really looking forward to playing for the first time in the game. And I remember the real life British Grand Prix this year was an absolute banger, and so I could not wait to get to that weekend in the game and try and recreate a little bit of that magic and see if we can make something happen in this alternate F1 universe we currently have going on. I'm also curious to see how it goes with the lowered AI difficulty, and this will be our first instance to see if our new AI difficulty level is going to be a good place to be for us. It's also going to be the first time we're doing a full qualifying session, and so we're going to go from Q1, Q2, and Q3 in this one if we can make it. As we jump forward into our best run of Q1 here, you can actually go ahead and see in the top left there that we are currently running in P7 towards the end of Q1, and I think it's going to be our first instance of seeing the difference in the AI level that we were running at in previous episodes up till now and into this episode here, as we currently are running faster around Silverstone than Lewis Hamilton, and that just seems a little odd, but we are not going to complain too much about finally having a little bit of success as we end up finishing Q1 in P7. We'll head back to the garage and then we'll actually make it through to Q2, in which we'll once again move on to our fastest lap of Q2. And you can see once again we are still running in P7 here in Q2, running just ahead of Magnussen and Schumacher in the Haas, and just behind Bottas of the Alfa Romeo Sauber. And we are doing our best to get around the track as smoothly as possible, trying to make up time as best we can. And we will actually get through once again into Q3 based on this lap. And so I think at this point we're starting to see that the AI might be a little too easy, just because, you know, our car is not that great and really probably shouldn't be qualifying in the top 10 and in a full qualifying session. So we're not going to complain, like I was saying, about a solid qualifying session, but at the same time this is probably something that needs to get addressed after this weekend. As we head now into Q3, currently running in P5, right behind the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc and ahead of the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas. Once again, just trying to hit our lines as best we can, still struggling slightly to hit some consistent laps, but nonetheless we are making our way down this back straight towards the final few corners here of the Silverstone circuit, trying to qualify as best we can for the next day's Grand Prix. As we round the final bend, waiting as long as we can to get on the power and come across the line, we qualify. Currently sitting in P3, that's not where we will end up. As we pull up the final results here, we end up in P8 behind Lando Norris and just ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, our new rival. And so at this point, P8 is probably where we would be in this group, but at the same time, we probably should not have made it to Q3 at all. But once again, we are not going to be complaining as we head to Silverstone in the British Grand Prix.
Welcome along then to Great Britain and the Great Silverstone circuit for today's Grand Prix. The 3.6 miles of Silverstone circuit in Great Britain is hallowed ground to the Formula One faithful. We have 18 corners that wrap around this former World War II airbase and some good passing opportunities at the end of the DRS zones. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. A fantastic effort from Charles Leclerc yesterday, and it's put him on pole, edging out Sergio Perez, who lines up P2. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Hamilton, Russell, Carlos Sainz, and Verstappen, Norris, the rookie, Ricciardo, and Mick Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, Magnussen, Sebastian Vettel, and Ocon, Tsunoda, Gasly, Lance Stroll, and Nicholas Latifi, Joe, Bottas, Fittipaldi, and Alex Albon picks up the last spot on the grid. Now it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track. Anthony Davidson joins me once again in the commentary box. Ant, it's fantastic to have you with us here, but I'm curious, as a man with experience out on the track, how do you stop those pre-race nerves from becoming overwhelming when you're lining up on the grid?
Well, I imagine they'll be starting to feel the adrenaline as they anticipate the run down into turn one, a bit like preparing to go into battle. The unknown situation will bring nerves, but that's a good thing. It will keep them focused on the moment and on their surroundings as we build towards the start of the Grand Prix.
So as we head to the grid, to the beginning of the formation lap, we are excited at our first opportunity in qualifying in the top 10 in P8 in a bit of a McLaren sandwich tucked in behind Lando Norris and ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. We are going to do our best to make it do with our position here, and knowing that we may not have the best car compared to the rest of the grid, but we can try and make smart decisions and try and avoid a lot of the common pitfalls that has happened to us in previous events, as damage has really limited us, as well as just a general lack of pace and definitely a bit of a lack of skill on the driver's part. I know that's my fault. That's what we're trying to address more with the AI difficulty change over the car itself, but we also know that our car in the long run definitely does not have quite what it takes to truly compete, and so we're going to do our best to defend as best we can as we head to the finish formation lap here. Our goal is to not lose too many laps here as we head to the 5 red lights for the start of the British Grand Prix. The lights are out and we are away here in Silverstone, trying to do our best to make and navigate our way through here. We kind of find ourselves towards the middle of the pack as we round turn 1 heading into turn 2. We actually managed to get a pretty good jump on the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc as we head around towards turn 3 and 4. We find ourselves battling with the McLarens as well as a Red Bull for once, and it's actually been a very solid start for us as we try and continue to make our way down this first straight, and the Red Bull just absolutely leaves us in the dust, as well as the McLaren also giving us a bit of run. You can see that the performance of the car is really showing here. We actually managed to cover off the McLaren a bit as we are holding on to the back of the pack for as long as we possibly can here on turn 1. We are going to do our absolute best to get caught up and try not to get too overexcited in our position of running in the top 10, trying to do our best to cover off Daniel Ricciardo as he will continue to attempt to make some moves on us, try and get around us, and try and hold off the rest of the pack behind us. So far so good. We know we don't have the best car. That's very clear down most of these longer straights, but what we can do is try and put our car in the best position to defend against those behind, aka Daniel Ricciardo, while also trying to do our best to not get too detached from the front pack, as we currently find ourselves falling behind just a bit as we come down this second long straight towards the final couple of turns here in the chicane to finish our first lap here in Silverstone, as we will now hop on board with me as we continue to move forward a few laps. We actually find ourselves behind Daniel Ricciardo now. That McLaren just doing just enough to get around us here in the first few laps, but nonetheless we do find ourselves with a bit of a cushion between us currently running in P9 and the 2 Haas of Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen behind us. And Daniel and I actually kind of find ourselves in a bit of a pocket here, and this is going to be a theme throughout this entire Grand Prix of battling with the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo, trying to do our best to not make any mistakes, with especially playing with a lower traction control. This is our first event of this MyTeam career with the lower traction control, and we definitely feel it more often than not. Trying not to get a little too excited on the throttle and trying not to spin out at all, because if we do that, then then that would really hinder us and put us in a terrible position, because even as of right now, trying to do our best to hang on to the back of Daniel Ricciardo, we also have to recognize that with the gap we have behind us, we have a fantastic opportunity to score some decent points here in Silverstone. And so while we are trying to be an opportunistic driver here, if Daniel were to make a mistake, we also understand that this is a long race, and we're only about a fifth of the way into it here, currently running lap 5, and we need to think about the long run also, not just this singular battle with Daniel, which I think is something that we've kind of suffered with here in the past, and trying to get a little too caught up in an individual lap or an individual move or an individual moment, and it kind of jeopardizes the rest of our race. We see this a lot with underbody damage and front wing damage that commonly is a very common occurrence for us, and it can really negatively affect us and deep into the race. That really holds us back, I think, more than almost anything. That underbody damage is super important, and it is absolutely a race killer if you don't respect it and try to avoid it at all costs. So as we currently get dragged along here by Daniel Ricciardo, just tiptoeing towards the end of the DRS range. We are doing our best to try and keep that gap to an absolute minimum, because if you get caught out without DRS, it's very easy, especially with others who may be in a bit more of a DRS train. That can spell some bad news. So the longer we can stay in the DRS zone of the McLaren is an absolute win for us, as we try and continue to pull away from the two Haas's and try and just hang on to the back of the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo. As you can see, the gap to Norris in front of Daniel is actually quite a large one. It's actually almost double the gap to the Haas's behind us. So at this point, we are just trying to hang on to the back of Daniel, and potentially we may be looking at a P9 or P8 finish in this one, just because that gap to the front pack just definitely seems a little too large for us to overcome over the course of this race. But nonetheless, I mean, a P9 or even a P8 result here would be an absolutely fantastic one for us, as we've only currently scored in 2 races so far on this season as we head to the British Grand Prix here in Silverstone. And so even a P9 finish we would be extremely happy with, scoring points. And here is actually the beginning of I mentioned there would be a theme to this race in Silverstone, and so this is where we truly get to see exactly what happened. And I believe I left in most of the race here, as we find ourselves running around Silverstone, unable to truly catch the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo, but also pulling away from the drivers behind us, but also losing time to the group in front of us. As you can actually see, Lando overtook Max Verstappen there. We get a couple of instances to get right on the rear bumper of the McLaren, but with our tires wearing down, and truly this is a moment where I kind of make the ultimate decision to not worry so much about trying to keep up with Daniel and kind of just letting him go eventually, just because our tire wear and tire management as the driver is not the best yet, and so we really start to prioritize our race here and not making any mistakes. But we'll slowly see the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo drive off into the distance, and we will kind of get left in the dust there. So I actually left this in here running about 500% speed, just because this is primarily what we'll see for the rest of this British Grand Prix. We kind of get in our own little pocket here in front of the Haas's of Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen, but as you can see, Daniel Ricciardo is just running away from us, over 3-second gap already, as we kind of slow down and move into tire management mode rather than push mode constantly. So as we are working on lap 11 here, we are actually nearing our pit window, and I believe, yes, at the beginning of this 12th lap, we get told that we're going to be pitting for the hard tires here in Silverstone, and so we make our final push lap, and we will love life in our little bubble. We get plenty of clean air, and we just get to a bit of lonely runtime. As we come down here, we'll go back to normal speed. As we approach the pit lane, we'll kind of talk about what we want and hope to accomplish here in the second half of this British Grand Prix. As we currently sit in P9, we will enter the pit behind Daniel Ricciardo, who is quite a bit up the road, especially with this long Silverstone pit lane with that pit limiter on. And so at this point, with the gap that we're currently seeing to the group ahead, all we're really hoping for is a safety car or some potential issue to really slow down the pack ahead. And if we don't get that, I mean, like I was saying before, we are going to be extremely happy with, scoring points is always going to be a positive for us. But it'll be a very boring day in Silverstone, as we won't see too much action as we come out of the pits with a solid 2.3 second pit stop. We will hit the end of the pit lane and make our way up and out, actually sort of behind our teammate of Enzo Fittipaldi, who is currently running in P15. Good for him. Hopefully he can continue to get better, especially now that these personnel upgrades are starting to work again with this new patch update. And you can see just how slowly I take it as we go back actually to 500% speed here, as we make our way down the second half of this British Grand Prix, as we currently sit in P16, but we will make up plenty of places as others begin to pit. You can see Fittipaldi enter the pits there, and we will resume our position in P9, now with about a 5-second gap in front of us to Daniel Ricciardo, and about a 3.5 to 4-second gap to the Haas of Mick Schumacher behind. And this is going to be where we run for the foreseeable future, and that's currently why I'm leaving it as a 500% run here, as we get a very lonely race. And it's actually funny that we actually get told by our engineer that we have a DRS issue, and would not be able to utilize it should we ever get in a position to use it. But currently running in about a 10-second window or 5-second window on either side. I don't believe having a DRS issue will truly cause much of an issue down the stretch here as we enter with 10 laps to go. We are at this point just trying not to make any major mistakes. You can see we're actually pulling away a bit from the Haas's behind us on those hard tires. I think we actually started to get into a bit of a groove here with these hard tires as they get lit up a little bit and get up to temperature slightly. They actually start to come alive, and we actually find a bit of a consistency here as we actually start to make up a little bit of time on Daniel Ricciardo ahead of us, but it won't be enough to really challenge here down the end of this race. But it is enough to, like I was saying, pull away from the two Haas's behind the Haas drivers behind us, so I think are actually battling a little bit, which is definitely slowing them down at the same time. And so what I think this race actually turned out was a great opportunity to work on playing with the lessened traction control and try and continue to work on being more smooth and less clunky and jarring with the inputs. And so it's funny to say that, you know, in the points finish can kind of turn into a glorified practice session, but that's kind of what this turned out to be. I also got plenty of time during this to think about the AI difficulty that I changed it to, and how it's probably a little too low, and in between this episode and the next episode we will be raising that AI difficulty level up a smidge, as like I said, it's probably gonna take a few episodes to really find the right balance, since you can't change the AI difficulty mid-weekend. And so it's going to be a few episodes until I feel like we really find that balance between difficulty and entertainment. So the difficulty for me and the entertainment for the videos, just because, like I was saying at the beginning of the video, finishing last every episode is not great, but also running away from all of the AI because it's too easy also isn't the most fun. So we're going to try and find that balance, and at this point I think we're good enough to hold the P9 with this AI difficulty, but not enough to really make up much ground on the group ahead. So I think that's how we kind of ended up with this Silverstone event, where we basically ran in P9 for 80% of it, and it's really, honestly, this is kind of where we end up coming home to finish. Nothing really happens. You see actually Carlos Sainz make an appearance 23 seconds up the road from us, and so you can tell that this was what it was. I mean, I was afraid of this when I lowered the AI difficulty as much as I did, but I figured it'd be easier to work our way up instead of continuously working our way down. And so we are going to get some solid points for our team as we continue to fight to improve both of our drivers as well as the car. You can see that our hard tires are starting to get a little worn down here, but with only a few laps left and a 10-second gap behind, I don't think that they're really too worried about the Haas's catching up to us. So at this point we are just limping it around very nice, easily, casually, working on our throttle control as well as braking, entry and exit speeds of corners, as well as, you know, really just doing the best we can. And so as we actually move back to regular speed here, we'll watch the last lap and a quarter here as we come down to the final couple of turns here before the pit straight to begin our last lap. You can actually see that Carlos Sainz actually DNFs from the race, and so even though we currently are running in a cushion of many seconds, we actually are going to get a free position here, as the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz is out of this race, unfortunately. You know, he got his first win here in real life, but here he ran all the way to the end of the race before DNFing, unfortunately. And that is just a terrible thing for the Spaniard and the Ferrari. So after running in the top 6-7 in the entire race, he ends up dropping out right at the end. And so that's really unfortunate for the Ferrari driver there, but we will take it as we get a free position, and we continue to run with it. At this point, almost a 10-second gap on either end, as Sebastian Vettel also drops out of the race. Although he isn't in front of us, he is currently running behind us, and we will not get another free position with, you know, one full lap remaining there as we enter turn one. And this is the point where we are going to be celebrating slightly, while also knowing that we have a bit of a way to go in terms of game setup, as well as skill for myself. I think as my first Grand Prix with the lower traction control, I think we finally got an opportunity to see what it's like to get to play with it in a race simulation setting. I think we are going to have a lot more success with the lower traction control. I already can feel at this point that it's going to definitely help us in the long run. I can definitely feel the difference in this versus the full traction control that we were playing with in the beginning part of the season. You truly can feel the lack of power now when I go back to the full traction control. But Charles Leclerc, as he probably should have gotten in real life, and as he continues to do in this My Team career mode, Charles Leclerc wins the Silverstone Grand Prix, just continuing his absolute dominance on this fantasy F1 season, because, oh boy, Ferrari is definitely not having this much success in real life. And so congratulations to Charles Leclerc as we continue around our last few corners to finish this British Grand Prix in P8, getting some solid points for our new and young team, as we will take the checkered flag in Silverstone to finish in P8. What a result for us. I know we have a long way to go, but after more than a few races of struggling mightily, getting that top 10 finish and those 4 points is going to be absolutely huge for us in the long run, and we definitely will make some tweaks here. But as the Scuderia engineers and pit crews celebrate, congratulations to Charles Leclerc. It looks as though Max Verstappen comes home in P3, and let's see if we can get a glimpse of who comes home in P2. I'm unable to see it as of right now, but I know we have a Red Bull, a Ferrari, and someone else who we will see here in a moment. The suspense is killing me.
And here we are, a team
as we get to see Charles walk down the hallway towards the podium. He continues to absolutely dominate the season. It's actually a Red Bull 2-3 as Max Verstappen and Checo Perez actually finish 2 and 3, and so at this point the Red Bull trying to do their best they can to hold on to the back of the Ferrari, but nonetheless it is the Scuderia who gets the top of the podium this episode, and we are actually celebrating as much as we can back in our own little pit box as we bring home good points for the team here in Silverstone. As we wait for the final results to come up here, we will take a look and see how the rest of the top 10 shook out, as Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, and George Russell bring out the top 6. Daniel Ricciardo finishes just ahead of us in P7. We finish just ahead of Kevin Magnussen and Fernando Alonso, who rounds out the top 10. And so what a fantastic result for us. We get a solid 4 points in the drivers and constructors championship, as we'll see where actually Enzo ends up finishing in P19, but with a couple of DNFs. He still has a long way to go, and definitely we will be thinking about, now that contract negotiations are coming up, we will definitely be thinking about his position in the team going forward, and whether or not we potentially want to move in a slightly different direction when the driver market really starts to heat up, and see if any changes get made towards the end of the season into our second season. And so he's going to continue to get better. We won't judge him based off of this one race now that the new personnel upgrades are going, and so we'll give him a little bit more time to think about where he needs to be and see what he can do. But as we look at the driver standings here, we currently move up into P11 by ourselves, a solid 16 points back from Daniel Ricciardo, currently sitting in P10. But with 8 points to our name, we are definitely on feeling and riding the high of that, as we also move into the constructors standings here. Definitely still behind the Haas by 5 points, but with 8 points now, we are definitely putting ourselves in a better position to try and fight slightly more for that P7 spot, and potentially trying to continue to move up as we near the midpoint of this season. And so great points for us. Can't wait to get back out there in the next one. I think it's going to be another good outing for us, as we look to try and continue to build on what we've got here. And so nothing to complain about on this weekend. We actually tie with Daniel here on our rivalry breakdown, but we actually will lead at this point by 1 on our way to 30 as we upgrade our driver acclaim to nearly level 9 and get our sponsorship upgrade. We will see you guys in the next one. Hopefully we can continue to build.